Lonely Monk Productions.
Yo, That's My Jawn is brought to you by Liquid IV. Guys, it is festival season. And you know me, I love a festival. And the secret to enjoying a festival is to stay hydrated. Liquid IV has you covered while you prep before, power through to the headliner, and recover after the weekend. Liquid IV hydrates 2 times faster than water alone with 3 times the electrolytes of traditional sports drinks. Man, I love Liquid IV. It comes in a convenient packaging and it's tasty. When you see me at the Exponential Music Festival this fall, you know that I will have Liquid IV on me. And it comes in 12 delicious, refreshing flavors to keep your hydration routine exciting. All right, strawberry used to be my favorite, but they have this new one. It's strawberry lemonade and it is a banger. 1 stick of Liquid IV in 16 ounces of water hydrates you 2 times faster and more efficiently than water alone. It's non-GMO and free from gluten, dairy, and soy. Liquid IV believes that equitable access to clean and abundant water is the foundation of a healthier world. So Liquid IV partners with leading organizations for innovative solutions to help communities protect both their water and their futures. To date, Liquid IV has donated over 39 million servings in 50-plus countries around the world. Okay, and you can get 20% off when you go to liquidiv.com and use the promo code YTMJ at checkout. That's 20% off anything you order when you shop Better Hydration today using the promo code YTMJ at liquidiv.com. Do it, and let's get our fests on. I don't know if y'all have heard Guilty Pleasures by Mike Gordon yet, but yo,
That's my Jawn! Hey yo, displace the guilt.
What's good, friends and family, neighbors near and far? Welcome to an all-new episode of the Yo, That's My Jawn podcast. The podcast, website, brand, movement, way of life dedicated to the embrace and championing of your passions. I am your host, Nate Runkle, a.k.a. the King of the Swingers Ball, the Jawn Goal VIP, a.k.a. Nate 3.0, back at it again with yet another episode of the podcast. As always, I hope this podcast finds you all in good health and in good spirits. On today's episode, I am joined by Michael Rault. We talk about his latest project, Symphony Orchestra, and so much more. And that's coming up in a bit. But first, hey kids, as you may hear, I kind of lost my voice. I played a gig today and I sang like a dickhead. And now, well, this is what I sound like. So you're going to have to deal with that. But how are we doing? You know, when last I spoke to you, I said I was rolling into some busyness, and it might have been a bit more than I was leading on to because, well, you see, I got married. That's right. Katie and I tied the knot, as they say, on May the 4th. Well, why May the 4th, Nate? Well, you know why May the 4th, because we're huge Star Wars nerds. So, in outfit homages to Han and Leia, we drove down to the courthouse and stood before magistrate judge and good friend of ours, Ed Levine, and he locked the legal ball and chain on our ankles and pronounced us man and wife. It was so amazing, and my wife, she looked gorgeous, and it was just such a perfect day. So, yeah, I apologize for taking an extra week off, but I'm a married dude now. In other news, I told you all about the Risk performance last episode. Well, that story is set to be released tomorrow, Tuesday, the 23rd of May, on the Risk podcast. How's that for a quick turnaround? I'll be sharing the links on all the socials and whatnot, and you can find it on the Risk website at www.risk-show.com and, you know, wherever you get your podcasts from. So be on the lookouts for that. And as always, hop on over to www.yothat'smyjawn.com if you have not done so yet, and sign yourself on up for the mailing list. It's quick and it's easy, and it helps me get all the news that's fit to print directly to you. And you know what? While you're there on the website, click that shop link and help yourself to some sweet Yo That's My Jawn merchandise. Do it! And of course, you can always be a pal and follow us on the socials at Yo That's My Jawn. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Post, Mastodon, Spoutable, well, whatever it is. You search Yo That's My Jawn and you follow that Jawn. Whoop, whoop. All right, we're going to take a very short break and then we're going to be back with my guest, Michael Rault. Hey man, do you want to make a podcast? Well, Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily and then distribute it everywhere and get this, even earn money. All in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. And then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. And when you want to take your conversations with your fans to the next level, Q&As and polls are the best way to get them talking. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, this is totally free with no catch. Ever since I discovered Spotify for Podcasters, I have been able to release this little hobby of mine to the world with very little effort whatsoever. They do all of the hard, unfun stuff. I just get to do the fun stuff. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started. That's www.spotify.com/podcasters. Y'all, quit being boring just eating dinner and watching TV every night. Next time, pull out a Wongo puzzle and enjoy the conversation and fun that happens when people puzzle together. Wongo is the perfect balance of a good challenge without being so hard that you stop talking to each other and leave your family forever. Trust me, once you try Wongo, you will never go back to a boring old jigsaw puzzle. They are 100% wooden puzzles that will last forever. Each piece is hand-drawn, so no two pieces are the same, and you'll discover some fun, whimsy pieces as you work through it. They come in a custom wooden box, which is perfect for storage and gifting. And they have so many cool designs like African elephant and the wild lizard and the sea tortoise. With stunning designs and unique shapes, Wongo puzzles are a cut above the rest. And I like doing the snow globe puzzle myself. It was so great to pull out a puzzle and be done in a night and not have it on the table for a week. So what are you waiting for? Go to wongopuzzles.com and pick your puzzle today. And be sure to use the promo code YTMJ to get 10% off your offer. This is the most fun you've had with a puzzle, guaranteed, or your money back. Go to WONGOpuzzles.com and use the code YTMJ to get 10% off your order and get puzzling right now. That's WongoPuzzles.com. Offer code YTMJ. My guest today is a Canadian-born singer, songwriter, and multi-instrumentalist who last year released his self-titled album and solidified his standing as one of the most talented songwriters in the game. The 10-song LP was a remarkable reimagination of 70s pop perfection. Now, together with Max Turnbull of the Badge Epic Ensemble, he is currently one half of the act Symphony Orchestra. Symphony Orchestra's debut album, Radiant Music, was just released earlier this month and is not just a sonic delight, but a tremendous showcase of both of their talents on both sides of the boards. Folks, it is my honor to welcome to the show, Michael Rault.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am joined today by the great Michael Rault. Michael, thank you for joining me on Yo, That's My Jawn.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So we were just kind of chatting, but like I've been eyeing this interview up for quite some time. I'm super excited to be able to get to pick your brain and talk to you about your music and stuff like that, man.
Well, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm glad we were able to finally arrange it.
Yeah, and it's crazy too because just a week or so ago, a friend of mine sent me. You know, we're always sending music back and forth, and he sends me some album, and he goes, "Oh, you're gonna have to check this out." And I put it on. I was like, "This is phenomenal. There's a new favorite or whatnot." And today, doing my research, going through your credits and stuff like that, you play on it. It's that
Oh, really?
yeah, it's the drug dealer release, which is
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I
which
played
is
guitar on a couple tracks on that record.
yeah. So it was just like a happenstance. And I was just like, oh, well, then I have something for you because I sent him the symphony orchestra stuff. So it was just like,
Oh, cool. That's awesome. Right on. Yeah, I'm managing it, getting around, working on a bunch of different projects all the time. So it's good.
yeah. And it seems like everything you kind of have your hand in is kind of just right in my wheelhouse. Like it's just sonic
That's great.
goodness.
Well, I'm glad to hear it.
Well, let's
That's what I'm
jump in.
shooting for.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. Let's jump in the Wayback Machine a little bit. Tell me a little bit about where you're from and where you grew up.
I'm from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, originally. I grew up there. Got a lot of family there still. I'm still an Edmonton Oilers fan who just got eliminated, actually. So, feel the pain with the rest of the people in Edmonton over that one. And then I guess fast forwarding to when I was in my early 20s, maybe 22, I moved to Toronto, lived there for 4 years. And then I moved to Montreal and lived there for about 4 years. And now where you find me at this moment is in Landers, California, which is very close to Joshua Tree. And for the last 4 years, I've kind of split my time between Los Angeles and Landers or the Joshua Tree area.
That's awesome. So when you were like kind of a kid or whatnot, what was playing around the house? Like, what were your folks listening to?
My family are all musicians, so I was really lucky in that regard. And my dad also ended up, I guess when I was about 10 or so, ended up becoming a disc jockey on a community radio station called CKUA in Alberta. And I guess notably, he started initially his very first show was called the R&B Review, and it was kind of like all R&B and stuff of that sort from probably the late 50s through to the late 70s kind of thing, sort of all that kind of stuff. So as a kid, especially at that point in time when I was around 10, there was a ton of old, R&B and soul and stuff like that being played around the house. But, there's tons of different stuff. My mom was my dad was like played in 60s rock and roll bands and that sort of era, I guess, influenced him quite a bit. Kind of that was when he was sort of in his, entering into his adulthood and playing music and stuff. And my mom was a little bit more of a child of the 70s. So she liked a lot of the like sort of California country rock, soft rock stuff, the Eagles and Linda Ronstadt and stuff like that. My dad was more into the R&B and soul side. And, all that stuff was kind of playing around the house a lot when I was a kid.
That's awesome. Did it click with you? Were you into music? Like it seems to be in the blood.
Yeah, I was. I mean, there's sort of different phases. I think like as a kid, I think I just naturally appreciated a lot of what they were doing. And I got to see both my dad and my mom play either together or with different bands a lot as a kid. And I think at a young age, that was just sort of, I don't know, you don't even really think about it. I think I enjoyed it, but it was just kind of what life was. And I hadn't had a moment to sort of conceptualize that or like realize that other people didn't have that or even think about like what that meant or what I thought about it. And then by the time I was in my teen years, I think I was really drawn to other young people playing music. And so I got more into like punk and sort of the local punk scene in Edmonton and stuff like that. And, even if some of the bands were pretty good, but, sometimes I'd be going to local community hall shows or whatever and seeing some band that was actually pretty terrible. And even at the time knowing that they're terrible, but still being extremely excited, just that it was like sort of felt like very much like what my family had done, but being done by people closer to my age. And so it sort of seemed really more accessible to me. And at that point in time, I got more into punk and sort of was a little bit more closed-minded towards what my family had been doing around me my whole life. And I went through a slightly rebellious phase, although basically supported by my family and not like on bad terms with them. But ultimately, I would say that I started through punk and through getting into that stuff, slowly started to like realize its roots in old school rock and roll and 60s garage and psych, and the influence of soul and country and blues and all these different things, and slowly started to realize like, oh, it's all basically all the same thing, and my family's been into this my whole life, and I'm now apparently just into the same stuff that my family's always been into. So that was kind of my progression as a young kid in terms of figuring out what I thought about music.
Yeah, it's funny how it always kind of comes back that way, doesn't it? Like my dad's favorite album was Nielsen Schmielsen, and like cool. As a kid, like I never rejected it, but it just wasn't like my thing. And then same thing. Fast forward like 20 years, and it's like the most important album of my my life. Like it just
yeah. I remember like when my dad was doing the R&B review I remember like my mom and my sister were much more open to it because my sister was too young to really like be outwardly rebellious, and my mom was obviously just not a teenager who was trying to be cool. So, but I remember like occasionally hearing some piece of like rock and roll. Like I remember the song called Justine by Don and Dewey, which is like very aggressive 1950s rock and roll, and they're like screaming their fucking heads off, and backed up by Little Richard's backing band, the Exciters, I believe is what they're called. I remember like hearing that, and even at that age being like, well, I can't really argue with that. That sounds like extremely aggressive rock and roll. But most of the stuff they're listening to wasn't scratching the aggressive itch that I needed at like 15, but slowly I came around.
Yeah. Well, so you play a crap ton of instruments. Was guitar your first entry point, or?
Yeah, my dad's a guitar player. So I had guitars around me my whole life. I remember trying to learn it from a young age, from really young, and feeling like it was somewhat overwhelming and couldn't figure it out. But by the time I was about, I don't know, in my early, tens, like 11 or 12 or something like that, I started to get shown a few things by my dad here and there. And then it was kind of a mix of being taught by him and then sort of being self-taught, but sort of slowly figuring that out and getting really deeply into it. But yeah, my family, we never owned a drum kit or anything like that. So, and we didn't really ever own any pianos either. I mean, maybe the occasional sort of like crappy keyboard. I guess we did have a few of those around, but I was never particularly drawn to them. We never had anything overly exciting or fancy, like an acoustic piano or something that I might have been more excited about. So all the other instruments had to kind of come later on in life, but guitar was always around, and there was somebody, luckily, who was there, and my dad, that could show me how to make it work too. So that was where I jumped into music.
Yeah. Were you immediately like writing songs on your own when you started playing? Because like I started writing before I could even play the songs that I was kind of coming up with in my head and stuff like that. And
yeah. I think yeah. I think I always had and my dad was also, my dad's also a songwriter too. So I think even though he wasn't really teaching me to write songs necessarily, I think maybe there's a certain like intrinsic way that somebody who writes music plays an instrument. Like his approach to it and his connection to it was very creative. So it wasn't like, for good and for bad, it wasn't like being taught. My dad wasn't somebody who was like a university trained guitarist. He's a very advanced guitarist because he played so much. But like, so his approach wasn't sit down and learn this scale to this metronome and just do it like this. But so I think it carried with it maybe a slight influence towards the more creative side, the way that he thought about it and talked about it and did it. And I don't know whether it was through his influence or not. I did immediately realize that it was like, I think initially almost like as a way to like goof around, a way, just like be like, oh, I could throw some chords together and then say some stuff over top of it. And that kind of be somewhat at first sort of humorous. And then as time went on, I started to actually, I guess then I started to play in bands, and then I started to realize that I wanted to have more and more material that I'd written for the projects, and that the projects didn't seem to like move forward in a meaningful way unless I was writing for them consistently. And so somewhere in my mid-teen years, I started to write more seriously. But yeah, I started writing, at least for my own, just sort of like entertainment in a fun way from, yeah, right around the same time I started playing guitar.
Have you, so here's a weird question, and it only comes up because I just kind of did it 2 or 3 days ago, but have you revisited any of those very early songs? Because I just went back and found like a binder of lyrics and stuff, and I started playing like 2 or 3 that I had written when I was like maybe 14 or 15, and I was like, I don't know, this is kind of a banger, and I feel like not knowing music, this works so much better than I now know music, you know?
I mean, I have some recordings around from my sort of first bands when I was like 15 or 16 that I started to actually try to record, and I'd put out sort of independent releases with those bands and played shows and stuff. I have that stuff somewhere, although I don't listen to it that often, and I haven't listened to it in years maybe, but I'm sure that there's a copy somewhere on some computer or in some drawer somewhere. As far as the really, really early stuff goes, it didn't all get recorded. I know that there's like, for a while I had my dad's, like my dad had bought like a cassette 4-track in maybe the early 80s or late 70s or something like that. I think it was a Tascam maybe, if I remember correctly. And I had that. It was at this time when I was like 14 or 13, there was no cool factor around like a cassette recorder. Nowadays everyone hears that and they're like, oh wow, so cool, but like literally no one thought that was cool at that time. It was like I couldn't afford a digital recorder or a computer, so I was like recording on this cassette recorder that could only record 4 tracks, and like at that time that carried no special value. But I had that, and also another thing that had no special value was my dad's RX5, I think, which is a drum machine from the 80s. And so there's somewhere there may be some of the very, very early bedroom recordings that I did at like maybe 14, even before I was like actually putting out, I mean, slightly more legitimate attempts and actually released things in my mid-teen years. But I don't know where those are. And as far as earlier lyrics and binders go, like, I don't know where those are either. So They might exist somewhere. It might be somewhere at my mom's house or something, maybe, or maybe somewhere at my dad's. But yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I had this idea of just throwing it up on, like, just doing like some basement recording of like 4 of the songs and throwing them up on Bandcamp just to satisfy that teen version of me from however many years ago.
That could be cool. I mean, I feel like, yeah, it's kind of like the Beatles doing One After 909 or whatever that song is called, the one that they do on Let It Be.
Yeah.
Sometimes fun to reach back into the very, very old material. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe something from my past will eventually be like that. I've kind of resisted ever going back to record old things because I'm already, every recording that I've made from the time I was, 14 till now, I've always been relatively obsessive, and it is a wormhole that I will lose myself in. And if I start letting myself want to re-record old stuff, I could easily just spend my entire life reworking the same songs over and over again. So I've always avoided it. But I think, in occasional moments, that can be a fun creative thing to do.
Yeah, sure. So when did you kind of realize, okay, this is it, let's do it? This is what I want to do with the rest of the life, or did that come gradually?
I think it came pretty fast for me. Like, I feel like my interest in guitar grew and music grew very quickly from the time that I started to learn it. And by the time I started to play, by the time I was like, I guess I was starting to play guitar at 11 or 12. And by the time I was 14, I was like, I'd say by 14, I was starting to try to put together groups of people to jam and to start bands with. And then by 15, I was probably playing shows. I think a couple first early incarnate, like there was like a year there of starting things and then everybody not really being that interested in quitting and stuff. But that was, I'd say by the time I was like 14, at least, maybe earlier, I was kind of basically like looking at the next, however many years that would have been, like, 4 or 5 years of school that were left ahead of me, and looking at the frustrations of trying to find people who were interested in actually working on a band and working on music and stuff, and basically being pretty clear that I was like, I just want to like start a band, start making records right now, basically figure out a way to get out of high school as soon as possible, and then do this. So yeah, I mean, from that point, certainly by the time I was 14, I was basically just dead set on doing this. For whatever reason, I'm not sure why I was so certain, but that was, it just seemed clear to me.
Yeah, it was a good choice. The how much of that kind of frustration trying to find the people who wanted it as much as you did? How much of that do you think influenced the amount that you do by yourself or have done by yourself, writing and recording?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it. That was like the very first bands I started in when I was like 14 or 15. Were bands, like proper bands, where we were all equal members and everybody was, well, I mean, not even at the beginning, I'd say not everybody was contributing equally. I was at least one of the top two like creative contributors to the project all the time, if not the top one in general, is because I was already quite obsessively thinking about this a lot. But quickly after a couple of those bands broke up, or as there was started to be, creative disputes that kind of held up the progress of the project, pretty quickly thereafter, by the time I was like in my later half of my 15th year on this planet, I started to I started a band that was like basically my name, similar to, it was like Michael Rault and the Mixed Signals was actually what it was called specifically. But that was like, and then I guess within a couple of years, I dropped any other name besides just my name. But both of those, the beginning of that, even at such a young age, I actually didn't really want to do that at all. I preferred the idea of the dream of like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and stuff like that was still very strong in my mind. And I would have preferred to have found a group of people who were just down to make this happen together and to be in a band and like to have the camaraderie and a crew and stuff like that. But it pretty quickly became clear to me that I was like just not going to have that from most people, and that it was very frustrating and slow going to like start a band and then have everybody be like, I don't want to do this anymore, and get annoyed with each other, and then have to like start another band. And even though these are like small stakes, still start to build up a little bit of a name playing the clubs that were available to us to put like in Edmonton or whatever. And once everybody decided that they didn't want to do it anymore, if it wasn't my name and my project, and it didn't really matter if I changed out members, then it was like had to start over again with a new name and like develop a bit of a draw and like get people into the project. So yeah, very early on, it started to be kind of like, well, I guess if I just do this mostly by myself, sometimes collaborate with people, but have it based around my name, where like I'm the only essential member that has to be there, that pretty quickly became the strategy as the only way that I could kind of continually keep moving forward. And I mean, that's kind of proven to be true many times over the past 20 years or so.
Yeah, it's great that you mentioned the Mixed Signals, because I just found out recently, and I just saw that there's live clips on YouTube of the Mixed Signals, and I watched some of that today. Some good stuff, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun. It's interesting stuff. I mean, Mac DeMarco is in some of those videos, actually, which is funny. He was in that band with us for a while, and when he was extremely young. He's a little younger than me, and I was extremely young. But yeah, there's some funny videos of us. I think most of the videos that survived from a particular era when one of our drummers' dads really loved to videotape us and put it up. So that's how it's managed to stay on the internet all this time, is on his dad's YouTube channel or something.
It's awesome. Yeah, the internet likes to keep things, doesn't it? It likes to.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's starting to. I mean, there's so much stuff on the internet more and more that it's like these things kind of get buried deeper and deeper. At one point, it seemed almost kind of like crazy, because it was like I was like, bands in the old days didn't have to deal with like all the random videos and recordings that were on the internet that they couldn't get off anymore. Like, most bands in the old days, once they signed to a major label deal or whatever, that's the beginning of their career. Very clearly, it was the first time that anything they recorded was released in any sort of major way. But it is kind of funny, as time goes on, all these old things are just deeper and deeper, and the endless amount of things on the internet. So it can kind of become obscure enough that it isn't really a huge focus.
Yeah. Yeah. So, when did kind of the desire to kind of sonically craft your songwriting in the studio, particular, more so than just because, like, that early stuff does still have kind of that garage rock kind of sound, but then at some point it's like something exploded in your creativity, and it was just like, oh, I can make this sound as spatial as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the desire is probably just always there. I think it's just there's a lot of skills that have to be honed to figure out how to make a record like that. I think, from a very young age, I was listening to, things like Pet Sounds and then also just increasingly a further and further range of different uh musical styles and projects and albums that achieved, greatness in different ways and intricacies in different ways and stuff like that, to a degree that I couldn't do at all. I was a pretty quick study for playing particular certain styles of guitar, like rock and roll and blues kind of based guitar and stuff from a young age. And I figured out a lot about writing songs in sort of relatively, I don't know, I guess like traditional sort of basic structures relatively quickly, but trying to figure out, both sonically how to make a record that could capture the sort of intricacies that you're talking about, and also how to write a song that could have, different, could evoke all the different sort of feelings and stuff that can be evoked by the sort of key changes and complex harmony and stuff that a band like the Beach Boys or any number of bands, but that was one of the first bands that I knew of that had that kind of stuff going on. And, it just took years of trying to figure out many, many different skills, from the composition to the playing, to the arrangement, to the singing, to the recording. And yeah, so I think the desire was there. Just it takes a lot of time to figure out how to do it. I'm still learning it and still, pushed forward by my dissatisfaction with certain things, but it's more and more satisfying and more close to what I had envisioned in my brain.
Yeah, it's such a weird thing, because I feel like for so long I kind of rejected the 70s era of recording, not because of any kind of dislike, but because like I lived in that world of like, there's too much going on. And I was like, I had like a real strong, like kind of minimalist period where I was just like, they're doing too much. Whereas now, like, I'm like, I go back and I look at some of the stuff that like I kind of rejected, like ELO and stuff like that. And I'm just like, my God, like just the craftsmanship and like just the skill to be able to kind of create, three-dimensionally this sound that just kind of evokes such amazing feeling, and it's one of the things that really draws me to your music, is because like you don't find that much anymore, especially with like digital recording and stuff like that, which you would think with people having access to 50 million tracks that it would be more you'd find it more frequently, but like it seems like we've kind of lost the kind of art of creating music beyond just the basic song structure.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of know what you mean. It's hard to say why that is. I mean, I guess there's always people who are making really interesting stuff in every era, I think. And more and more with the internet, it seems like basically everything is existing at the same time simultaneously. It's funny, like I've also kind of gone through a similar thing, I think, to what you're describing, in terms of there was a phase in my teen years where I was really drawn to like minimalist garage rock and old rock and roll and old R&B, and even went through a phase and punk and a lot of stuff that's just based around very minimal arrangement and very raw recording style. And at the time I even found, like, I remember like the first time I really like concentratedly listened to Abbey Road by the Beatles, and I remember thinking it was like it sounded like new almost to my ear, because they were recording on like 8-track instead of bouncing on 4 tracks or whatever. Like I was like, man, this is like just sounds like way too like clean and nice and like and everything. But like slowly I've progressed to that, but I do find myself in sort of an interesting way noticing some band that's doing something that's like very primitive nowadays and seeing kids like it or whatever. And then I'm like, it's funny. It's like these things just like continually happen. Some people, I've progressed to this point that now I'm listening to extreme, quite advanced stuff and like really liking the intricacies of more dense records or just more sophisticated records, like harmonically or compositionally. and there's other people I'm sure that are listening to stuff that they would not dig that at all. They would think it was like completely over the top and want to just listen to something really like stripped down and raw. And, and there's probably bands that were around when I was in that phase who were doing more compositionally in-depth stuff that I was probably like, oh yeah, I don't get it. It seems too weird. Like I just want to hear some straight rock and roll stuff. So, I mean, just kind of seems like it's all kind of happening. It probably always has all been happening simultaneously, but now the media sources are so divided and vast that you can kind of just tap into whatever channel you want to now, regardless of what there isn't really any sort of central mainstream trend anymore.
Yeah, well, as long as you can fit it in a 90-second TikTok, I guess is the
right. Well, I guess that is one. Although I feel like that's also still just like one channel that exists out there right now amongst a million. But I mean, it is a very popular channel at the moment.
Right. No, I say it in jest, but yeah. So you're you kind of compartmentalize and become like this solo, bringing in session musicians and stuff like that. But then you meet your current partner and girlfriend Pearl Charles, and you kind of start doing some collaboration. Like was that like awakenings, kind of that what you were looking for in the desire to find the your own the Beatles and stuff like that? Like
yeah, I mean, maybe it's definitely a slightly different thing between the young rock and roll band male bonding Beatles thing and the starting, making a partnership with your partner. It's a little different, but at the same time, it is that has been this relationship has been the most dedicated partnership I've had, both like romantically and also musically. Both of us are, I think that was a huge part of what we both saw in each other when we met each other, was two people who were extremely dedicated to doing music in a serious way for a very long period of time before we even knew each other, and then have both carried that forward for the last like almost 4 years, I guess now. But yeah, that has been really helpful. It is much easier to try to do all this stuff with at least one other person who is understands it and is also interested in pushing, working with music forward as much as possible. So yeah, it's been a blessing to have somebody else working on it as well with me.
Yeah. Do you think something like, just kind of jumping towards where we are now, do you think like something like Symphony Orchestra would have happened if that wouldn't have kind of opened up your collaboration kind of?
Well, Symphony Orchestra actually was kind of the precursor to me and Pearl's relationship musically. I actually was finishing we were recording in late 2018, early 2019 for like the initial Symphony Orchestra tracks. It was like right after I'd finished touring for the It's a New Day Tonight record, my 2 records ago, my solo stuff. And my friend Max Turnbull, who we did that Symphony Orchestra record with, me and him are our Symphony Orchestra. He kind of just started coming over to my house and pushing me to sort of collaborate with him on some stuff. Not like pushing me overly forcefully, but I before that time had been very guarded about working on music around other people. I didn't really like co-writing at all at a younger age. I think partially because I had had some music industry success to some degree, or at least met people who were in the music industry who were like, oh, you're a good songwriter, you should co-write with somebody. And then I just get thrown into some situation that I felt was like, had no chemistry, and I didn't know the person at all. And I was young and I didn't really 100% know how to just like make a song as on command as I can now. So I kind of felt like a little shy and embarrassed in those situations. And so I kind of just developed like completely no collaboration approach to writing. I just wanted to kind of be alone and figure out what I wanted to do. But Max and me, that was an interesting thing where I kind of realized when we were doing those initial Symphony Orchestra sessions, he kind of put me on the spot a couple times where he'd have an initial idea and I'd be arranging it with him and making up parts and stuff on his idea. And then he'd kind of be like, okay, well, we need a bridge or something. And then I would actually kind of felt a bit of that initial shyness or apprehension that I'd felt before with co-writing, but then I kind of went into it, and it was kind of a moment of like realizing that like, oh, I've been doing this for a long time now. I can actually pretty much just write something on command when I need to, regardless of who's around or whatever. And so that was a huge step towards being more open to collaborating more. And then as it so happened, me and Pearl actually basically connected like over like one of the weeks that Max was in Montreal with me. He was living in Toronto when we were doing those initial sessions. The last one that we did of the initial symphony orchestra sessions before we kind of revived it in last year. But one of those the last of the first sessions in 2019 was like the same week that me and Pearl started to kind of come into each other's orbit. And so by the time I moved down here, symphony orchestra was kind of on the shelf for a while until we resurfaced it recently. And coming into me and Pearl's relationship, had luckily had that experience of being a little bit more used to collaborating. And Pearl is also an extremely collaborative artist. She's always been drawn to co-writing and sort of more input from more people. And so luckily I was able to come in and sort of be like, oh yeah, I've done this a few times now. And so then it kind of became a seamless transition into us doing a lot more co-writing together and a lot more collaboration.
That's awesome. Like it's cool how that kind of bookends. Like it kind of creates that little sandwich in that time there.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting. And in the time between, I was just kind of down here fully immersed in the world that me and Pearl were building together and playing in her band and on her sessions and doing my records and stuff. And then and that time Max had twins with his wife, who is Meg Remy, who has a band called US Girls as well. And they had twins kind of during the COVID break time. I think it was like the first time that they'd had enough of a break from musical projects and touring and stuff that they ended up diving into parenthood and having, and they ended up having twins. So they got twice what they were initially expecting, most likely. But so yeah, and then by the time COVID had kind of thawed a little bit and we were kind of starting to figure out what we wanted to do next, and they were kind of getting more comfortable in the parenthood phase and stuff. And I was kind of starting to get a little bit more settled down here after kind of running around like crazy, trying to figure out how to live in California. And then we did a couple more tracks and finished up the symphony orchestra thing. And that's how that all kind of came to be finished.
It's killer, man, because like, that like you guys all came out of the pandemic, like just firing on all cylinders. And like, so like Magic Mirror, then your solo album, and then, the US Girls album and the symphony orchestra, like everything is just like coming out. And like, just it's so exciting to me as someone who is a fan of all of your music, because you can just sense like the growth and kind of like you can see like kind of strands of where it can go, and that excites me for like every new thing. So like when you started posting about releasing the symphony orchestra stuff and I first heard it, like I immediately ordered the vinyl because like it's just something that I want to hear analog. Like I just want to put it on my good speakers and I just want to sit and just kind of bathe in that sound, because like when Radiant music just kicks in, I was immediately just like, holy shit, here we are. Like this is what we're growing to. So it's really fascinating to me to hear that it kind of started pre all of that. Like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's been an interesting theme. There's like a certain theme to the last, I guess, basically like starting in early 2019, the very tail end of 2018, which the symphony orchestra writing sessions and demo, and which became basically the recording sessions because the demos ended up becoming the record. So that process was kind of the very beginning of this sort of phase, and COVID is like the biggest landmark in the middle of it. And it was obviously a momentous and huge thing that left a lasting impression on everybody who was alive on the planet throughout that period of time. But it's kind of interesting because it's only really one of a bunch of things that have kind of led in a certain direction, and just in terms of how my life was going. And I kind of think it's sort of has something in common with Max's life probably, and Pearl's life certainly, and stuff. It's like it's been kind of an interesting thing. It's like moving into doing stuff kind of outside of the box, like a little bit. Not that I've ever really been exactly like part of the mainstream music industry, but I kind of think something about like the end of the touring cycle for It's a New Day Tonight kind of like opened up this mindset of wanting to do more experimentation and trying new things and kind of getting off of the beaten path. And the symphony orchestra thing was kind of just a project that sort of was characterized by not really knowing what we were doing, and there wasn't really like a clear goal or like, you know, I think like to some degree my career, you know, whatever, like my music making experience was characterized for a while by like having record contracts and knowing like, okay, I need to do this record by, you know, a relatively reasonable amount of time, and then I'm going to release it, and then I'm going to tour it, and I'm going to put out another record. But like the symphony orchestra thing was kind of a detour into just being like, I don't even know what we're doing. I have no idea. Like we have no idea what songs we're going to record until we're in the room and we make it up and we record it. And then coming down here, and COVID kind of reinforced that because there was no touring. We didn't know if like, you know, everybody didn't know what was going to happen next in any way. And certainly we didn't know if we were like ever going to tour again or put out records or do anything. It was kind of like, well, who knows? Maybe that was fun while it lasted. Maybe we won't do that anymore. Which then really opened up an interesting sort of feeling of like, kind of after once we started to like venture out and kind of just hang out a little bit with like, you know, small trusted groups of people and stuff, then we started rehearsing more with the people who were in the band, in Pearl's band at that time, which then sort of led towards them becoming my band for a while as well. But we kind of just would like, I had my self-titled record kind of mostly finished. I was finishing it throughout COVID as things sort of started to like loosen up again a bit, but I had the songs. And so I'd sort of like get together with some people and jam those songs. And then we get together and jam some covers. And then we get together and jam some Pearl stuff, and just kind of like playing music for the fun of playing music, I guess, which symphony orchestra also was kind of, you know, based around. So then it's, you know, I guess basically, and that's kind of led to like building more and more of a recording studio out here in this house in the desert, and kind of just like it's still a professional pursuit, but it's more and more sort of outside of the box of a more conventional way of pursuing it, and also kind of more and more like a creativity first thing rather than I mean, creativity's always been maybe first, but even the sort of like business careerist mindset sort of starts to fall by the wayside, and it starts to be about making music and just figuring out how to survive while you make music. Because we're definitely all the types of people that want to pour the majority of our time into making music. And we try to figure out how to make that make sense. And so now it's just, you know, recording tons of projects at the studio for other people that I'm producing and playing instruments on, working on Pearl's records, working on my records, working on symphony orchestra things, and that will probably expand further and further as time goes on. But yeah, that was a long-winded explanation for how it's been an interesting sort of expansion period based around sort of limitations kind of forced it, but it has created a much more expansive approach than what was existing before.
Yeah, I talk a lot about it on here a lot, but like COVID really did this weird thing where it kind of made me, and I feel like it made a lot of people kind of reframe their relationship with playing music and listening to music and stuff like that, because like,
yeah,
you know, there was a time I thought it was all gone. I really did. Like, I was just like, oh, I guess I just don't play shows anymore unless I'm in my basement on a live stream or something, you know, like it was.
Yeah, no, totally.
And so like, you know, it's made me like kind of take a look at it and go, do I love this? And I you know, and it made me realize I do. You know, it was almost like a break. Like we were on a break, and I realized this is the one for me. You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, totally. And it definitely, but those kind of breaks definitely allow you. And I guess this is probably happening, probably across the board in society, really, at this point in time now that we're coming back from, like, everyone took a break from everything, which is kind of a crazy thing to happen. It hadn't happened previously for, you know, hundreds of years maybe in our society. There hadn't been a moment that everyone was like, stop doing everything. And then after stopping doing everything for a little while, I think we're still going through the process of it collectively, but and individually, but you start to reevaluate once you've actually had a break and you're not just in the habit of just doing things habitually, come back and you're like, what do I actually like about what I was doing, and what do I not like about what I was doing? And it's been interesting. I think I've learned a lot about what I like and what I don't like about what I was doing already with music, and now that's informed the new approach, and it continues to. I think it's still in a process of evolution of like coming back to it with a fresher perspective.
It's incredible. Are you guys looking to play shows symphony orchestra based or?
I don't know. We haven't really discussed it. It could be something that could happen. I've kicked it around privately. I guess I should tell Max this. At times I've thought like, oh, we could do something if we wanted to at some point, where like Max could easily come to LA and rehearse with my band we could get the band in order on the stuff, and we could play a show here or in California, and we could probably do the same thing with his band. He's got a great project called Badge Epoch Ensemble, or Badge Epic Ensemble is how you're supposed to say it, although it's spelled weird. But he's got this great band, really great players. I've done sessions for his band as a backing musician with him, and also collaborated with a lot of those players when I was in Toronto. So I could easily fall in with them too, and we could do shows like that. So it's something to keep in mind, but it's also kind of the beauty of having a side project is just like, there isn't as much like tied to it. It's like, if we ended up doing symphony orchestra shows, I think it would be a special occasion and a special occurrence where maybe if people have caught on to the record, maybe some people would actually come out and be like, wow, they're playing a show. And it would really be like, a special moment, hopefully for everybody. It would definitely be for us, because I don't know how many times that stuff will ever be played live, if ever. But if it happens, it would be cool. But it would be definitely just sort of it'd be probably a one-off, or maybe it'll happen a few times, but it probably won't happen that many times.
Yeah. Yeah. You have been, touring and obviously doing a lot of shows, with Pearl, where you guys are kind of, playing in each other's stuff. Is it a challenge to kind of play the entire night, like that, or?
No, it's great. I mean, I think it's better because, it is, I guess there's like maybe some element of exhaustion that can come with it to some degree, but it's kind of, first of all, like when you're like touring with another band that isn't all the same members. So like we're touring with Pearl's band with another entirely different group, or with my band with an entirely different group. Especially if you're opening, you have to like set up on a short amount of time, play the show, and then you have to get everything off the fucking stage like immediately. And sometimes in certain venues with not the nicest staff and stuff, they're like immediately on your ass, just like get off, and you're like, get out of the venue right now before you even sell merch, kind of thing. That happens sometimes, and certainly even if it's not that extreme about getting it out of the venue, this is a lot of running around to get the gear on the stage and off the stage as soon as you're done playing. So it's nice to, like, when we're doing the double band thing, we pretty much get to come in. We get 2 sound checks worth of time to sound check for both projects, which are the same setup. So, and then we get to leave the stuff basically on the stage the whole time we're there until the end of the night. And we just get to go up and do one set and then say thanks, and we'll be right back. And then we go off and hang out for a little bit, and you aren't like running around, and you can like go to the merch table and sell a bit of stuff or have a drink or whatever, and then come back up and do it again. And then you probably get to chill a little bit while you sell stuff until the venue's actually closing and they want you out. But that's like in that regard is way less work, a lot less like hurrying up and running around. And the playing part, it's like, it's kind of nice. Like it does, I've said it before that it's like, you end up driving like anywhere from like 3 to 12 hours in a day sometimes on tour. And then you play, and especially if you're just doing an opening slot with one band, sometimes it's like you drive 8 hours to do like a half an hour set. And I've cynically said before that it's like we're more like professional driving team than we're professional musicians, because we spend like an 8-hour to 30-minute ratio of like time spent driving versus playing music on any given day is like kind of a pretty brutal ratio as far as the part that's like fun and the part that's not fun. So it makes up for it a little bit to be able to be like, oh, we did 2 45 to an hour sets. That's a little bit better compared to the 8-hour drive that day is like to do 2 hours of music. So yeah, that whenever we do that, it's really fun.
That's cool. I'm still bummed. You guys were in Philly, I want to say like October maybe or November of last year, and I had
That
to
was
miss it.
really, I'm sorry you missed it. That was actually a surprisingly extremely fun show. Not to rub salt in the wound that you
Thanks.
missed it, but that was it was a show that stuck with me, just in the sense that we played New York the night before, and it was a bigger show, and I think we all were a little hungover after that night too. And then we went to the Philly show, a smaller venue, and at first it wasn't like super well attended. At first, we were kind of like, whatever, it's just going to be our it's like a weekday, the day after the New York show or whatever. But then it ended up being extremely fun. The people who came down, it was actually one of the more memorable shows of the last couple of years. It comes to mind every once in a while. Again, sorry to
so I'm glad.
But that was a really fun show. Hopefully we'll get back though. I mean, it feels like Philly. It'd be fun to come back and play Philly because that was a really promising gig.
Yeah. I know there's like WXPN played a lot of the tracks off of Magic Mirror. So like cool. I know there's definitely like a base here of people who would love it. So yeah, make that happen again, and hopefully I'll be able to make it this next time.
I do love Philly in general too. It was just one of those. The only reason that show seemed not promising was just that it was like a Wednesday or something, and it was just kind of felt like it was like, if anybody's like going to come, but it worked out well. But I've always loved Philly. I've played a bunch of shows in Philly, so I'm sure we'll be back before too long.
Okay, good to hear. So you're obviously always working, or you got a follow up to the self-titled coming up, or?
I mean, I do, but not like in a way that it hasn't really been done yet. I have a lot of little ideas and stuff, and I'm going to dive into that sooner than later. But another sort of element of the break of the continuity from the old world to the new world for me has been kind of taking a slight breather from doing my own stuff. Pearl has a new record that's in the can that's sort of, we're just figuring out the release plans, and I ended up actually doing a lot more co-writing and playing and arrangement and stuff on it than I had on Magic Mirror. In Magic Mirror, I came in and ended up playing a bunch of stuff and providing a decent amount of stuff to it, but the writing had kind of already been done by the time I showed up and we knew each other for that record. So this one was, has kind of taken form since we've moved out into this house in Landers together and stuff. And so we didn't record it here. We continued on with her producer, Louis Pesikov, who actually worked on my latest record and in a partial producer role and then produced Magic Mirror as well. But I was more involved just kind of in the writing and the conceptualization of the record, and we collaborated a lot more on that. And I've also been producing a lot of bands just at the studio here, and playing a lot of instruments and producing that stuff, and kind of just getting more into the rhythm of like making records from start to finish on my own, in my own studio and stuff. So I think I'm gonna probably pretty soon, I think I'll probably jump into making a new record that I might just make with me producing and engineering it here, which and Symphony Orchestra also kind of has played into that too. I mean, it was kind of a mistake. It was by accident, because initially I was just thinking we would just do demos and then maybe go to a proper studio, but we weren't even really trying to make a real record with that one. The song Concerto and Unthink the Thinkable, I did the basic tracking at the studio. And so those two are a little bit more indicative of what kind of sounds I can get here and stuff. But in overall though, I'd say that even though with the other stuff, we were kind of just like off the cuff recording it, pretty lacking in sort of like any sort of focus on the engineering. People have really liked it, and it sounds really cool. And I definitely have been doing better and better stuff at the studio. So it's been a good period for gaining confidence of moving away from recording at like Daptone and really famous high-end studios, and kind of moving into doing it on my own. And I mean, I've got more and more cool gear and stuff too, but it's cool to know that I can just kind of dive in and make projects on my own and get good response from them. So that's been that will probably play into the next record.
That's awesome. Do you see producing as a lane that could take over more of your time? Like, do you dig that?
Well, it has. It really has been kind of besides when I'm not on tour, I've been basically like full-time producing projects here. And Yeah, I mean, I think as I keep like picking up little bits more gear and learning more stuff, and I'm enjoying it more and more. And I mean, it's always been I've always been pretty active on the production side. I've always been very at the very least, very annoying to the producers I worked with. If I wasn't actually contributing production, I was at least driving them insane by being very particular about what I wanted, even if I didn't really know what I wanted. So it's always been something I've been very passionate about, but I've just finally sort of taken the time to dive into learning everything that I need to know about doing it. And yeah, I mean, the production stuff I've been doing has been getting better and better responses from people, both in the public and people that I, trust and respect in the music scene and stuff. And yeah, I don't know. I guess I kind of have, taken on the idea of sort of being like kind of in the Todd Rundgren mold as kind of maybe what my life path will look like for a while, is kind of splitting my time, going back and forth between working as someone behind the scenes producing people and also making my own records. So yeah, I think that it'll probably never fully overtake my solo career. In terms of like, I mean, who knows? Maybe something I'm produced for someone else will be more successful or popular than my solo career. Who knows? But I don't think it'll ever completely replace it. But it's something that I really like doing, though. I mean, I think the production side of what I've done and the arrangement side and the instrumentation side of my records is a huge part of what I've been doing all the time anyway. So it's pretty familiar and fun to just to take out the initial part where somebody comes in with an idea to me, and maybe I co-write a little bit with them, but maybe I don't even do any songwriting. And then it's just purely like, well, how could we arrange this and how could we record it and what instruments would sound good on it? And like, that's something that I've already been doing for a long time and enjoy doing. So yeah, it's been cool to do it all.
I dig it. Rundgren's from around here, and I
totally.
grew up in the same hometown that John Oates grew up in. So if you ever want to make my War Babies, I will we'll make that collaboration happen.
Keep in touch. Let's make it happen. I know both those projects are huge influences on me. So I've got a lot of Philly influence and stuff I've been doing.
I dig it. All right. At this time, you want to go through my standard Jauntlet questionnaire here. I ask this of all of my guests. It starts with the one-hit wonders. The first one, Billy Joel or Elton John? Who do you prefer?
Oh, yeah. I was looking at this one. It was tough. I think I'd have to say Elton John, but it's really close because I do really love Billy Joel. But I'm going to go with Elton John.
Okay. Good. Debbie Harry or Joan Jett?
I go Debbie Harry.
Okay. All right. Aretha Franklin or Tina Turner?
Also a very tough one, but I guess I'd have to go with Aretha.
All right. Nirvana or Pearl Jam?
That one's easy. Nirvana. I don't really like Pearl Jam, so that one's easy.
Okay, all right. Janis Joplin or Stevie Nicks?
Stevie Nicks.
Dig it.
I'd probably have to break up with Pearl if I said otherwise. Pearl's such a huge fan. I think I would have said that anyways, but it would be odd for me at this point in time to say Janis Joplin.
Yeah, I dig it. The big cliche one, Beatles or the Stones?
I mean, this is such an impossible question that making the kind of music that I've made, I've had to answer a million times. The automatic answer is just the Beatles, but I mean, on any given day, I might prefer the Stones. I want to listen to them more, and they're an amazing band. But obviously, the Beatles are the Beatles, so I'll go with them.
Yeah, you know what? I think it's almost unfair because there's so much more Stones material that like I'll still every once in a while a song will come on and I'll be like, I've never heard that. How have I never heard this? Like and they're
they're just so good, and they do have a wider, like a longer range of material, like as you're saying, but they're just so good. I mean, they're such a different type of band, but the Beatles just end up getting the automatic response, I think, for me if I have to choose one, because they just are the innovators of recording arts in a way that the Stones kind of were part of that too, but they weren't quite the same level of like the inventors of a lot of stuff. So I'll just give the Beatles the automatic answer, but I mean, the Stones are awesome.
Dig it. The final one of this section, Bohemian Rhapsody or Stairway to Heaven?
Also an extremely tough one because I have such a strong affinity for over the top self-indulgent, insane operatic movement songs with all these crazy parts. But I guess if I had to choose, I was gonna say I'll just go with Stairway. But I
Okay.
loved Bohemian Rhapsody so much as a kid that I almost went that way. But I'll go with Stairway.
I dig it. I dig it. All right. The last section is the top 10 countdown. As we discussed, Jawn can be whatever you want it to be. Number one, what was your first Jawn? What was the first thing you were obsessed with as a kid?
Well, I mean, it's actually good that we just talked about this because I would say actually the Wayne's World cassette soundtrack, I loved it. I loved that movie as a kid, and it had Bohemian Rhapsody on it and a bunch of classic rock stuff. And I just that was maybe my first obsession as far as like a record that I owned on cassette. But yeah,
that cover of Ballroom Blitz that's on there is phenomenal. Like,
well, totally on the movie, and I think I can't remember on the soundtrack they might have the original version of Ballroom Blitz, but maybe they put the cover. I can't even remember, but I did. That song knocked me out. There was just tons of great. There was a mix of sort of '90s hard rock and classic rock, and I was stoked on it. And yeah, obviously it must have somewhat influenced my long-haired rocker vibe for the rest of my life.
absolutely. Number two, what's your current Jawn? What are you into right now?
Again, these questions are so hard to answer definitively, but since we already talked about Hall & Oates, I'd say in the last year, the Hall & Oates, the Silver album that has like what songs is it? I think it's just called the Silver album. I think because it's just called like Hall & Oates, but that album has been an obsession for the last like year. I don't listen to it all the time, but every time I listen to it, it's some of the best production and sort of weird advanced progressive yacht rock soul music possible. It's really a great record. So I'd say that's one of my current obsessions.
I dig it. I've worked out this version of Had I Known You Better Then off of Abandoned Luncheonette for the one chance that, because I play a gig in North Wales still, and there's an off chance the restaurant that I play at occasionally, John Oates will show up. So like,
cool.
I have it in my back just ready for him to walk in one day just to like be like, do you want to jam with me? Like, are we doing this? Like, I'll take Daryl's part. You can do your own. It's fine, but.
I heard he's really nice from what I've heard. He's very chill, so he might do it.
I met him once and I sold him a copy of Speaker Box of Love Below by Outkast, and it was the craziest moment of my life.
Oh, cool. We were working at a record store and he came in.
Yeah. Back in the day.
Did you get him to buy an Outkast record, or was he like looking for it specifically?
He was literally on his way out the door, stopped, turned around, and was like, "Oh, before I go, do you have the new Outkast CD?" And I was like, "Andre and Big Boy Outkast?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Oh my God, yeah."
That's cool. I mean, sounds like he's got good taste through the years, which is not always the case with old classic icons. So that's cool.
Yeah, he's on that that I don't know if you're familiar with the Handsome Boy Modeling School project, but he's on the second one of those with a song called Greatest Mistake, I think. I'm going to send you a link. It's absolutely stellar. Number three, what was your first concert?
Besides seeing my family play, the first, this might not be the absolute first, but one of the first like really big concerts that I remember going to was with because of my parents being in the music scene. One of my friends' dads was in our neighborhood was a music journalist in Edmonton. So I just kind of stumbled into him having extra tickets to go see Bowie play at the Rexall, or I guess it was probably called the Coliseum at that point. It's the old stadium in Edmonton that they don't use anymore. But so I think when I was really young, I didn't really understand the significance of it. But throughout my life, as I've gotten more into Bowie, which I'm quite into him now and know quite a lot of his catalog, I've thought back on being like, oh yeah, I went and saw him play live when I was like 8 or whatever. So yeah, that was maybe the first really big one that I can think of off the top of my head.
That's killer. That was my first one, was 1983, the Serious Moonlight Tour. And
really crazy.
Yeah. So cool synergy. Number 4, what was the last concert you were at?
I mean, I just played a show on Sunday. Played at a couple shows this last weekend. I'm trying to think, what is the last thing I went to that I didn't play? I guess I could just say I saw old acquaintance friend of mine, Paul Cherry, play at the show I played on Sunday at the LA Fair. And it was really great. He's awesome. That was so I actually sat and watched his set, even though I was on the bill. I was actually an audience member for his set, and I enjoyed it. And that might be the last most recent case of me as a spectator at a concert.
I dig it. Number 5, what was your favorite concert? What was the best show you ever saw?
I'd say probably, actually, I guess it's kind of like a tie. I saw Dr. Jawn play in like 2012 or 13 or something like that at the Edmonton Folk Festival. And the cool thing about that, he played on a side stage, so it was like really close in a small environment. Where I mean, not it was like a big field, but he was on a short, like a low stage and stuff. So that was really great. I guess also, they'll change it up and say at the Edmonton Folk Festival on the main stage, I got to see Lee Von Helm in that brief period when he was when his voice was back miraculously before the cancer resurfaced and he, reemerged and he died. But so that was really magical too, getting to see him play. And that was the bigger stage. And I was kind of off on the side, sort of peeking around those speakers, trying to see him from the dance area. But it was really magical. I guess those would be 2 of my all-time best concert experiences.
I love it. Which that just reminded me, the Christmas Must Be Tonight cover made my Christmas playlist. I love that. That's good stuff.
Right on. I'm glad to hear it. I mean, he's a band fan, so.
Yeah. Oh, God, they're so good. They're so good. Like, they just.
They're great.
Number 6, who have you never seen live that you wish you would have? They can be living or dead.
Wish I'd seen live that I. I guess I could go with. Here's an obvious one. I've never seen Paul McCartney, which is kind of crazy. I always find myself just being a little bit too busy / my money's tied up in buying gear or something. I haven't gone some opportunities that I've had, and I regret it sort of, but I know that the opportunity won't always be there, but he's one of my favorite musicians. And so that's a little bit of a glaring oversight on my part, but hopefully I'll get a chance to do it before too long.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you see the Let It Be news that that he and Ringo are playing on Dolly's cover of Let It Be on her rock album that's coming out?
Oh, no, I didn't know that. That's cool, though. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's absolutely fries my brain. That like, oh, that's what gets them back together? Like, come on. Number 7, name an unappreciated, Jawn. Name something you wish had some more attention to it.
I mean, so much stuff I listen to is relatively unappreciated old stuff. I'm terrible at remembering names, though, especially because some of them are things that I just only really like one song from or something, but it deserves to be known. But I guess I've written an article about this once before, so it's one of the first things that comes to mind. But the album Love Songs by Billy Nichols is very underappreciated. It's slowly getting a little bit more appreciated, maybe a bit more in the time since I wrote the article a few years ago. Not because of me, but I think it started to be found out a little bit more. But that's a great album that people know his first album a little bit, and even that's like a record collector deep head cut. But his second album, Love Songs, like it isn't even a majorly sought after record, I don't think. So it's a great album that people don't pay enough respect to.
I love it. Great answer. Number 8, what's your favorite album? I know that's loaded.
I mean, that's a tough one, obviously, but it's it is really, really hard to say. But what is my favorite album right now? This is like totally probably not true in terms of what my actual favorite album is. But I'd say that an album that's been very influential in the time since I met Pearl and she showed it to me has been Ian Matthews' Stealin' Home. It's a really great yacht. It's like a yachty sort of folky, weird late 70s, early. I think it might be like 1980. It was probably recorded in like 1979. It's a great, but it's a great album. It's been something I've gone back to, at least certain tracks on it, a lot over the last few years. But it's probably not my favorite album, but it's the first thing that comes to mind at this point in time, and that's the best I can do.
That works, man. That definitely works. Number 9, name an artist whose output you'll consume anything they release.
is also extremely tough. Almost everybody has hits and misses, you know. I mean, who do I like everything by? I mean, it's funny because it's like I'm tempted just to say the Beatles because I'm just like, well, whatever. Every one of their albums is great, and you can listen to it. I don't listen to it a ton anymore, so it feels a little bit like a cop out because I'm like, it's not really my like go-to jam right now. But it's tough because it's like a lot of the stuff that I like more and more as time goes on is like slightly more outside artists, and sometimes that means that they're not always fun to listen to. Like it's like I love Zappa, but I don't want to listen to everything he's ever done. You have to listen through a lot of stuff to find the stuff you like. And I love Bowie, but same kind of thing. Like I feel like I don't like everything he's ever done. And 10cc is probably one of my absolute favorite bands, but they also are very weird and occasionally can push things to a point that I just am like, this is like so like challenging as a listener. I don't really want to listen to it again. So yeah, I guess the Beatles is probably the only band that I'm like, put on any Beatles song, I probably know all the lyrics and I probably like it in some way.
Right on. The 10th and final of the top 10 countdown. What is your favorite Jawn of all time? It can be anything you want it to be.
I guess, I mean, you know, maybe I'll just go oh man, what is my favorite Jawn of all time? You know, just because they just got eliminated, I'm just going to say the Edmonton Oilers. I'm a big Edmonton Oilers fan, so they're my favorite Jawn of all time. I've been into them as a team since I was 7, and I just went through the heartbreak of having them knocked out in the second round of the playoffs. So I'm just going to shout out the Edmonton Oilers right now.
Right on. I feel your pain as a 76ers fan who also just got knocked out of their playoffs. I will commiserate with you because the Flyers are garbage, and I can't.
They just made some big changes. Maybe they'll bounce back. It's about time. Philly should have a good hockey team.
I agree. It doesn't feel right if we're not there. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. No. So Radiant Music Symphony Orchestra is out now. If these cool cats and kittens want to try to track you down on the internet, what's the best way to find you?
Michael Rault on Instagram. I think it's Michael_Rault. I think it's at Michael Rault with no underscore on Twitter, just to keep you on your toes. And Facebook.com/Michael Rault, and on Spotify as well, or streaming services or whatever. I try to keep all the shows up to date on the lists on there and everything. So yeah, there's just, basically the internet. If you search my name on the internet, you'll probably figure out what's up with me and be able to figure out if there's a way to come out to a show or pick up a record or something.
I love it. Michael, thank you so much for doing this. This has been such a joy. And as I said, I've been waiting to do this for almost 2 years now. So I'm so glad we finally got to do it.
Yeah, I'm glad we did it. Thanks for having me.
My thanks again to Michael for joining me on the show today. The Symphony Orchestra's new album, Radiant Music, is out now on all major streaming platforms, and the vinyl can be purchased from their Bandcamp page at symphonyorchestramusic.bandcamp.com. You can also find Michael's self-titled album and his previous releases at michaelrault.bandcamp.com. Be sure to follow him on the socials at Michael_Rault on Instagram and at Michael Rault on Facebook and Twitter. Links to all of those, as always, will be in the show notes. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to the Yo, That's My Jawn podcast, wherever you get your podcast from. And troops, it is never too late to get yourself a super awesome Jawn Scout Merit Badge for Citizenship of the World just by rating and reviewing us. Don't forget to visit www.yothat'smyjawn.com for articles, merchandise, and links to all of the previous episodes of this podcast. And guys, while you're there, be sure to sign up for our mailing list to get all of the updates delivered straight into your inbox. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/YoThat'sMyJawn for updates and live streams. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Yo That's My Jawn, and search Yo That's My Jawn on YouTube to find the Yo That's My Jawn YouTube channel. Like and subscribe the heck out of that ish. We want to hear from you. Reach out, and touch some Jawn. All right, my friends, that's the show for now. I'm going to go rest my voice. But don't you forget to check out my appearance on Risk, out tomorrow, wherever you get your Potty Pod podcasts from. Heck yeah. Blue skies. Until next time, everybody.
Hey yo, displace the guilt and embrace the pleasure. Your taste in music doesn't have to be.
Yo, That's My Jawn is a Lonely Monk production, written and produced by yours truly, Nate Runkle. Theme song by Phil Tyler Music featuring Nate 3.0. Special thanks to Fox Run Brands, DX Ferris, Andrew Scott, Natalie Runkle, and the incredibly brilliant and wickedly stunning Katie Daubney. If you or anyone you know has any ideas they would like to share or any guests they would like to hear on the podcast, please feel free to reach out to us at yothat'smyjawn@gmail.com. Or you can leave an audio message for us and possibly hear yourself on a future episode by visiting anchor.fm/ytmj/message. Until next time, be sure to displace the guilt and embrace the pleasure and shout to the world, yo, that's my Jawn.